Hello everyone, Bag here. So there's recently been a lot of discourse about the increase of HP inflation and overall difficulty in the endgame of HSR, to where a lot of players are feeling obligated to pull for vertical investment options in order to keep up with what the game throws at them. I feel like every content creator under the sun has weighed in on this issue, and so in the spirit of contributing something different to the conversation, I instead want to go over some of the more important cornerstones of successful endgame clears, in order to essentially try and help remove any skill issue from this discussion. At the end of the day, Star Rail is a stat benchmark game in many senses, but where there are places to improve your decision making, you should always try to improve. That's enough stalling, let's get into things. Number 1, make use of getting hit. Energy rotations are some of the most important things to keep track of during your clears. Some characters entirely rely on how frequently they can send out their ultimates in order to become properly useful. Getting hit, then, is one of the very few external avenues you can take in order to maximize your energy gains. This goes further than just realizing when you've been hit and trying to take that into account for when your next ultimate comes up. It should also factor into your decision making with how to decide to tackle enemy formations. Stalling a break or a kill on an enemy in order to let them get off a few of their attacks can be the deciding factor of clearing within entire cycles. For example, here, I purposely stall my facial ult until the robot enemy launches all of their attacks, as these attacks help Robin achieve a second ultimate within this first wave. This either lets me clear comfortably in one cycle for this first wave, or it lets me send out a Robin ult at the very start of the second wave, and both of these scenarios end up saving me an entire cycle. Another example of this mindset is in Pure Fiction. When multiple enemies spawn at the same time, they usually have the same amount of action value. So, if they are already attacking you, you might want to let them finish attacking your characters to get the most out of them before killing them and letting the next wave spawn, since there is no action value being lost between the first enemy and the last enemy of the group attacking. Number 2. Do as much as you can in a cycle before moving on to the next one. This is a tip that is exclusive to Memory of Chaos, as the other two modes have no thresholds to reach in terms of doing things within a certain cycle, besides the ending of Pure Fiction, I guess. If you can guarantee that you can clear the first wave of MOC within a certain cycle, your main priority should be to maximize the amount of resources that you can get out of this wave before moving on to the next wave. This can be with your team's energy, with your team's skill points, with personal character mechanics like with Acheron or facial stacks, or in just making sure that your HP is in a good enough position so that it's not a problem that you need to spend resources on in the start of the next wave. The only thing to be careful with this is to not waste automatic actions in the action bar, like a Mem action advance or the ending of a Robin or Firefly ult. It's not a matter of stalling things for as long as possible, but you should always try to position yourself in the most optimal scenario that you can. Number 3. Plan ahead to nullify annoying mechanics. The cornerstone of any turn-based game is the eternal struggle between the well-oiled machine that is your team's rotation and whatever the game attempts to throw at you to disrupt that rotation. Throg is a good example of this, with his constant slows and a hand that can single-handedly, get it, ruin runs. Anticipating these mechanics with answers of your own might slow down your clear by a little bit, but ensuring that your well-oiled machine stays running can make all the difference. In this example, I wait to use my Hunt March's ultimate, as I know it can fully stun an imprisoned hand once it spawns. I then use her ultimate before Throg's next attack to make use of the first tip, letting his AoE hit charge March's next ultimate so that I can repeat the process if another hand spawns. This breaking up the hand stalls time for me to break Throg before the hand recovers, which hopefully ensures that the hand will never get a chance to move before the fight is over. Alternatively, for this fight in this MOC specifically, you can kill one pig in the first cycle and leave the other one alive, and break Throg so that his hand spawning turn is after the first cycle is over. Then there will be no room for the hand to spawn, thanks to the 3 pigs and 2 enemies on the field, which eliminates the problem of the hand entirely. Do what you can to avoid these annoying mechanics. It's more consistent and more fun in the long run, trust me. Number 4. Stop caring about energy at the end of the fight. This is an obvious tip when it's said out loud, but it's at its most important when it's kept in mind in the middle of a clear. Usually, waiting for any amount of time on using an ultimate after it's fully charged comes with its own set of risks, as you are foregoing any and all energy that you would otherwise receive as you hold on to it. However, depending on the character or the rotation, this risk is worth taking under the right scenario, and the end of the fight is probably the most common scenario to bring up. If you know that you will only get one more ult out of your carry, don't plan around optimal energy gains, plan around optimal damage. Buff an ultimate with Ting Yun or Huohuo's ultimate. If it's the last ultimate that character will send off. If it saves you a cycle, it doesn't matter how ugly or unoptimal the clear looks. Whatever ends up working is the correct option. For a quick example, in this fight, since I know that I will only get one more ult out of the Herda, I stall using it until I can use my Huohuo ultimate. so that I can make use of the extra attack buff. It ends up being a complete overkill, but it's a thought that counts, right? Number 5. Utilize any surplus of skill points. It is a resource to use. If you use the second tip well, and you come into a scenario where you have more skill points that you know what to do with, it is okay, or even optimal, to be liberal with your skill points usage. Spend an extra skill point on your Ho-Ho, your RMC, or your Ranmei, even if they aren't needed to maintain skill uptime, or if you don't need to sustain at that moment, as the extra energy can lead to faster than normal ultimates. Note that this should not be done excessively. In SP-hungry teams, an SP surplus is not likely to last, but as the title of the Cornerstone says, SP is a resource that should be used, not stored for the winter. Optimal play has you being just as close to your maximum SP usage as possible, but it's completely understandable if you need to stray away from being completely optimal in order to leave a little of the surplus behind for when you need that extra thick Aventurine shield. So in essence, if that was a little bit confusing, be as liberal with your SP as you can afford to be. But if you need to rely on a surplus to deal with a difficult fight, then that's fine too. Number 6. Time use speed or action advancing, which includes buffs in Pure Fiction or Apocalyptic Shadow. With the new iteration of Pure Fiction and its new buffing mechanic, we now have 2 out of 3 game modes with an occasional team-wide action advancing as a core mechanic of the endgame. What that means is that you should keep in mind who is triggering this action advance, and how it relates to your team's mechanics. For example, a team-wide action advance can potentially double the amount of time you spend in a Robin ultimate, which not only improves your damage, but it also gives her more time to build energy to her next ultimate. Or, conversely, if an action advance forward happens at the same time as a Robin ultimate, then this essentially completely wastes the second action advance, since your entire team is at 0 action value already. Getting free action value from advances from Robin or game mechanics are some of the most important ways to minimize the cycle or action value that you use in a run. It's how those people clear Apocalyptic Shadow with little to no action value use. They go through their entire rotation and end things off by action advancing their entire team. If it means sacrificing some buff uptime to make sure that you're getting the most out of your advances, you should at least consider the trade-off instead of just mindlessly clicking the alt button. Number 7. Utilize unit placement. A short and simple one, but it's a cornerstone nevertheless. The basic idea is that units on the ends of the team are less likely to be hit, as blast attacks are less likely to hit them when compared to the center 2 units. So, to combine this with the first tip, where you want people who are energy hungry to get hit, you should have any high aggro unit in the center 2 slots, so that when they are hit by a blast attack, your team gets more energy overall. This also means that if you are using a unit who doesn't have energy, like Acheron or Fei Xiao, you can put them into the corners without any sacrifice to their performance. Units that are extremely energy hungry, like Robin, should be placed next to your aggro sponges, as them getting hit is again one of the most optimal ways that you can get them charged. And, of course, counter units like Blade or Yun Li should be placed toward the center, to increase the chances of them being hit by stray attacks. This last one might conflict with the Lushaka planar effect, so whether you prioritize the extra energy regen from the ropes, or the extra energy from the unit placement, will likely depend on the kind of attacks that the given enemies will be sending out. Number 8. Store damage until after buffs and debuffs are set. This is another simple cornerstone, but skill issue can oftentimes be solved by small corrections, so they are worth going over in any case. It's easy to be swept up in your team's rotation that you do the same every time, but depending on the fight, saving your big damage hits for after your team applies their abilities can help maximize your damage. Here, I wait to use my Fei Xiao ultimate until after Aventurine uses her ultimate. I get close to capping her ultimate stacks, but as long as I don't actually start to overcap, no value is lost. Another big example with this is to wait for single turn buffs, such as a Bronya advance or the buff from Bronya's Light Cone, as buffs that only last one turn oftentimes need to be planned around to be used in tandem with large damage hits. Number 9. Turn on the action value on the turn order, please, please, please. This is both the most simple change that most of you probably won't need me to tell you about, and the point that I want to be the loudest about. The amount of incredibly valuable information that you are completely missing out on by not having the action value next to a unit's turn is actually insane. I cannot possibly understate this point. The gap between 2 units' turns on the turn order indicator is literally impossible to decipher without the number attached to it. It can tell you how much use you can get out of action advancing, how close an enemy's action is, which is important when considering breaking or turn delaying them. It can tell you approximately how closer or far away you are from the end of a cycle, or even just how much action value you are losing with every turn in Apocalyptic Shadow. It is honestly a very questionable decision to have this option off by default in the settings, as as in my eyes, it is an absolutely integral part of the game. Again, most of you who are watching this probably turned this setting on day 1, but for the 5 to 10% of people who haven't, please let this be the only takeaway you get from this video, if nothing else. And number 10, gear your units correctly. Alright, I know, this is kind of a cop-out for a 10th tip, but as I said in the beginning of the video, about 80 or 90% of this game can be decided by the decisions that you make before entering a fight. Speed tuning can be a pain in the ass, but doing it correctly can double or triple the amount of turns that your carry can put out. I would recommend to look up and watch some recent low cycle clears that use similar teams from the ones that you use. The investment in the team cost and in the relics will likely be different from yours, but the chances are you'll get somewhat of a better idea of where you should be aiming your clears to be like. There's so much easy stuff that should not be ignored. Get your traces maxed out for anyone that has even somewhat important traces to level. These are guaranteed improvements to your clears that should come before grinding out marginally better relics until the end of time. Try and fiddle with your ER requirements. Maybe your Robin will feel a lot smoother if you give her Bronya's Lycone and a Lushaka instead of her event weapon and Keel. There are things that you can fiddle around with and try out before you start swiping. And if your natural inclination is to swipe instead of manually finding better ways to improve your account, then I'm sorry to say that that's a problem with your mindset no matter how bad the power creep is. I want to be clear, this is not me defending Hoyoverse in any way with how they handle their endgame. But the 11th secret commandment is to never, ever, ever, ever swipe in this game because you are not able to clear. It's not worth it, it'll feel like a hollow victory after the fact, and it tells Hoyoverse that what they are doing with their endgame is correct for them to do financially wise. The game inside the game with HSR is to save enough Jades by playing through the game to be able to spend on improvements for your account without swiping. If you don't like that game inside of a game, and you just want to pull for whoever regardless of meta and regardless of what's best for your account, then that's completely fine. But right now, Star Rail is in a position where going down that route will make clearing endgame pretty difficult. The endgame of HSR is not compulsory to clear. My final message is to use these cornerstones to squeeze the most that you can out of the tools that you have on your account. But if you can't clear anyways, take it as a challenge to fix your account with in-game Jades. Spending is the easy way out, and you are better than that. Alright, I ended up talking about the endgame problems more than I initially wanted to, but hopefully this video wasn't too disjointed in its messaging. I hope you have a great rest of your day everyone, and look out for my next streams, as I'll be trying to go live whenever there's enough content for me to go over. Take care of yourselves everyone, bye!